Hello, my name is Dan Johnson and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a Big Finish collection video. It's been a very long time since I've done one of these. The last time I did was in 2022, and since then my collection has grown tenfold. It is quite huge now. I didn't realize how big it's gotten until I had a look at the video that I previously posted last night. I used to have it all in this little section in my wardrobe, and now it takes up a whole series of shelves to my left. And we're going to be talking about everything that I've got and taking them off the shelf and going through. First off, I have this book, which is The Art of Audio Adventures. This is a series of 200 episodes of Big Finish, and it shows off the artwork and then it shows off a bit of a blurb about each one. It's a really nice release, and to flick through in an afternoon and just have a look at some of the artwork that's been produced. As we're talking about bigger releases, I want to start talking about digibooks. This is a digibook for The Last Adventure, the Sixth Doctor's final story in terms of his timeline. It's able to give the Sixth Doctor a bit of a swan song just before his end, which is quite nice, and I think that's definitely something lacking when it came to the initial transmission of Time on the Run. And then we have the first release I believe I bought, the first release that wasn't a spin-off, I think, and that is The Legacy of Time. This was the one that kind of got me invested in everything. I mean, I got really into the Eighth Doctor because this, and ended up going into that sort of strain of events because of this release. It is 6 stories, each with a different Doctor, and is celebrating, I think it was 20 or 25 years for Big Finish having the Doctor Who license. And then for the 50th anniversary of the Master, we had Masterful, which is a lovely release. I think it is one of my favourites because of the interactions between all of the Masters. And the story itself is so well entwined, even though it's quite complicated. Having listened to it many times, as I say, one of my favourite releases, so I listen to it a lot, I have got this appreciation for every element of the story. So a 3-hour adventure about the Master and different incarnations of the Master meeting is just like gold dust to me. Next, I have 3 more digibooks of 10th Doctor's adventures. So we have Volume 1 here, which was out of print and I managed to find on eBay for a reasonable price. And then we have Volume 2, starring the 10th Doctor and Rose. And we have Volume 3, once again, with the Doctor and Donna, and this time with Wilf. All 9 of these stories are sort of like safe bets. You kind of know what you're going to get. They're not really pushing the boat out in many respects, but it's just having a big fun adventure with teams that you love, and I do go back to these quite often. Let's start off with some classic Doctor releases. First up, we have the comic strip adaptions, which is a release of the 4th Doctor. It has the Star Beast and the Iron Legion. Of course, I bought this for the sake of listening to the Star Beast before the episode actually aired. Then we have Blood and Steel, a part of the Unbound Doctor release as played by David Warner. Of course, these are actually Bernie Summerfield adventures, which I very rarely dip into. I purchased this one because I thought the idea of the Cybermen sort of being like the Nazis, and also how it's portraying the Cybermen in this story, is really interesting and really dark. It's something that the show itself, or even Big Finish, using, normal incarnations of the Doctor, probably wouldn't do, but there is such darkness to that story that I thought, yeah, that's definitely worth listening to, and it was absolutely excellent. Then we have the Unbound Doctor of War. Now, these are weird releases. I was never a big fan of these. I felt like they never went too far with the idea that the Doctor was unbound, and it felt like we were just slightly different, but not different enough. We were still sort of in the parameters of the show, and I kind of wanted it to be crazy and to go in all different places that you really want to expect and be a different Doctor. It's like the 6th Doctor also kind of being the War Doctor and just having these adventures as if he was in the Time War. It's a really weird sort of series of events. Then we have the 3rd Doctor releases. I have 2 3rd Doctor releases. I have Intelligence for War here, which is a very season 7 story. Really loved that. And we have the Quintessence, which is a fairly new story with the older Joe Grant. I very rarely dip into the 3rd Doctor. I only do it when I see a release that I think is really interesting, simply because of money. When I see something that I really like and I think that I'm going to really enjoy that story and the reviews are good, I do buy it. And I've always had a good time with the 3rd Doctor so far. Then we have the 5th Doctor releases. We have 40 here and 40 Part 2. This celebrates the 40th anniversary of the 5th Doctor. and this was a lot of fun. The releases are nicely tangled together. The second box set particularly is a big action autumn story with lots of sort of twists in it. Really enjoyed that one. And then we have the Sixth Doctor, and first off we have the 11, which is the Sixth Doctor and 11, as you can probably imagine, engaging in the story together. And I really loved the 11th from the Eighth Doctor adventures, so seeing him going up against the Sixth Doctor here and be given more time, for him to be the focus, was something I really enjoyed. And there's a lot of stuff you can do with the idea of regenerative dissonance, and it does it super well. Then we have this new arc, which I'm calling the Purity arc. We have Waterworlds here, Purity Undreamed, Purity Unleashed, and Purity Unbound. These 4 sets have been some of the best stuff that I've heard from Big Finish in a long time. I have really looked forward to getting each one of these releases. The story, the characters, the dilemmas that the Doctor has gone through has been really brilliant. The Sixth Doctor is pretty excellent on Big Finish, and it continues. And I think it's also his 40th anniversary. And then we have the Quinn Dilemma, a story in which the same Doctor, but multiple times throughout his life, are put up against different sort of adventures, different mercenaries, different villains. And it is really enjoyable to see how it all sort of twists around each other to make a really nice narrative. Then we have Tiles of a Time Lord, a story that I described in my review as being like smashing your action figures together, but an awful lot of fun just to see or listen to that, and the events that follow that set. Then we have some Seventh Doctor. We have Blood and Ice to start off. Blood and Ice is one that I have not really listened to since it was released. That says a lot about that release, don't you think? Then we have The Last Day Part 1 and The Last Day Part 2. The Last Day is an interesting one because it is essentially the final story of the Seventh Doctor in terms of canon. And it was a bit of a mess. They tried to throw a lot in there and it did not help it. It was very, very rushed, very confusing. The character elements weren't always there. They just feels like it was just a bit of a waste of time in the end for me. And it's 6 hours long. And then we have the Classic Doctor's New Monsters set, and this is the first one that I have purchased. It's called The Stuff of Nightmares. I think this is like the 4th one, maybe in the 5th one. They're always quite interesting for whatever you get. Whatever they're going up against, it's fun to see these two worlds meet, I suppose, the classic era and the new era. And that also continues into Broken Memories. Oh, this is number 4, so that means that that's number 3. There are 2 that I have not bought, but I have listened to them through the Big Finish podcast and through BBC Sounds. But once again, a lovely series of stories to go through. It's always a safe bet, those releases. Then we have the 60th anniversary from Big Finish, which is finished in 2024 with Coda, the first appearance of the Fugitive Doctor. This is a bit of a mess. The delivery for these has been a mess. There are some really beautiful gems in here. Past Lives, The Us, The End of the World, I absolutely adored. Then there are some that I feel like damage the series as a whole. Genesis for War, Two's Company kind of point holes at the idea of what they're trying to do, and they kind of become like throwing a dart at a dartboard, and whoever it lands on is who's going to appear. It feels less sort of thought through in that respect than just who was available, who could we get to try and bulk out this special release and make it more interesting. And with that, there feels like there's a little bit less of a focus on what's going on, and it was not helping the series as a whole. And this brings us nicely on to the 8th Doctor releases. We start off with some sagas. So the first saga here is Dark Eyes, a box set or series of box sets that tie nicely together to try and form a big, huge story for you to listen to. It also introduces the Alex McQueen Master, who I think has actually appeared in the 7th Doctor audio, but this is the first time that he goes up against the 8th Doctor, which has done quite a few times since. Then we have Doom Patrol, introducing the 11 that I mentioned earlier. Again, a series of fun releases, this time also featuring River Song. And towards the end, the Weeping Angels. And then, ironically, the first one that I bought from the saga was actually a set called Ravenous. There are some beautiful gems in here. The Caldor episode in here and the big two-part Christmas episode is a lot of fun. I think the problem I had with this saga itself is that I don't really like the idea of the Ravenous. And when you are, well, I don't mind the idea. I have issues with the way that they deliver it in the story, where they kind of just are being chased by it all the time, and I don't feel like there's much of a mystery here or something to keep me going into the next couple of box sets. So with that, you know, you end up with a really sort of lackluster middle. And even though the masters show up at the end, that's a fun story. But to get there, especially in the third box set, that my sort of patience with what the Ravenous is sort of wanes a bit. And then the most recent saga that we've had is Stranded. Stranded is a slower paced, the Doctor is stranded on Earth series in which he has to navigate getting back to Earth, but there's also a huge time manipulation plot and various other things going on that I don't want to spoil for you, but we have 4 box sets of that. And there's still more 8th Doctor to come. This is when the timeline does get a bit messy, but you'll see what I mean in a second. And the next release on that shelf is What Lies Inside. They believed it was time that the companions, Helen Sinclair and Liv Chenka, were given standard stories, because they're always doing these big adventures, and they have done since Doom Coalition. So they thought it was time to maybe flesh out their characters a little bit, give them a little bit of a single episode structure instead of a 2 episode structure. And they did the same with the second part, which was called Connections. The story with the Weeping Angel is absolutely excellent. Then the timeline goes a bit weird, because these on the spines are labeled 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But actually they take place different points during the 8th Doctor's life, very different points in fact. We go right back to the start of the 8th Doctor in Audacity, where he is introduced to a new companion of the same name. Here he goes against the Cybermen. That is a lot of fun. That's a 2-parter, a huge story called The Great Cyber War. And then we have In the Bleak Midwinter, which also features Charlie Pollard. Even though these are labelled, we actually fast forward again into Liv and Helen's time with the Doctor in a box set entitled Echoes. And then we go back again for a release called Deadly Strangers, back with Audacity and with Charlie. But we do know that the 8th Doctor's timeline does end with the Time War. So we have the Time War box sets here starring Rani Thakura as Bliss. She's excellent. I can't wait to see her again. So we have 4 box sets of that in this big 4-disc state. They are lovely sets. They do get a little bit timey-wimey at times, and not all of them are gems, but there are some gems in there. And then recently, well, I say recently, a couple of years ago, the Time War was reinvented again, and we have a different companion for the 8th Doctor instead of Bliss, and that is Cass. And he is joined by his his great-grandson, called Alex, as played by Sonny McGann, the actual son of Paul McGann. We had 2 releases of that, and there's a very interesting narrative on the horizon with these companions and a character that is impersonating them. And with the 8th Doctor unable to remember Bliss, there's bound to be fireworks at some point. Next up, we have an awful lot of the 9th Doctor. Blimey, there have been 3 series, so 12 box sets so far. I don't know what the future holds for the 9th Doctor, but I'm sure it is promising. So we start off with the first release, which is, of course, Ravagers, a 3-part story that has a lot of time shenanigans. Probably was not the best one to start off with, especially if you're not very good with Big Finish and sort of understanding what's going on. This story will not help you. It is very, very complicated to listen to. I've listened to it many, many times now, and I'm only just starting to get it. I found a love for it, but only recently. Then we have Respond to All Calls. Once again, we've got a series of stories where the 9th Doctor goes on a couple of one-off adventures. Once again, a lot of fun. Then we have Lost Warriors, featuring the Cybermen in 1 episode, and the film Metropolis, I think it is, which is deemed to be like one of the first sci-fi films. That one was quite interesting, but I think my favourite has to be Old Friends. This story was amazing. the Cybermen, the Brigadier, the guy from Unit, what's his name? Something Bishop, Sam Bishop, I think it is, as played by Warren Brown. Really, really enjoyed that set. Then we go into the second series, I think one of my favourite box sets of the releases, and that is Back to Earth. The final story, Auld Lang Syne, is one of my favourite New Year listens. I think it's brilliant. Also, Station to Station is a really nice character piece. And we have Into the Stars, a Sontaran story, a Jack Frost like character. Once again, more fun for the Ninth Doctor. And then we have Hidden Depths featuring Liv and her girlfriend Tanya, as well as the Sea Devils in that set. Then we have Shades of Fear going up against the Vashta Narada in this set, which rounds out Series 2. And then we start off Series 3 with Pioneers, and the Ninth Doctor goes up against the boss from the Green Death. Then we have Travel in Hope. We have Alpha Centauri, Ice Warriors in this set. And then, as we go into set 3, we have Bernie Summerfield making her appearance with the Ninth Doctor. And finally, our most recent set was Star-Crossed, starring River Song, as played by Alex Kingston. All of these sets are, at worst, mediocre, but some of them are absolutely excellent. I have adored listening to it, and I love getting a new Ninth Doctor release. It brings us nicely onto the rest of the 10th Doctor. We start off with the 10th Doctor Classic Companions, where, as you can imagine, the 10th Doctor meets classic companions, including Ace, Nyssa, and Leela. Then the 10th Doctor also meets River Song in this set, entitled The 10th Doctor and River Song. It's quite surprising, isn't it? And then we have the Dalek Protocol. This begins Dalek Universe. Definitely one of my favourite series to ever come from Big Finish. I absolutely adored this series. We start off with this one, which is a sort of prelude, I suppose, to the main sets with the 10th Doctor. And then if we go straight into it with Dalek Universe 1, the idea of Dalek Universe is that it's inspired a lot about Terry Nation's sort of idea of the Daleks and going sort of sending the 10th Doctor back and being amongst the events of like Dalek's master plan. So we have mechanoids, we have a series of characters such as Mark 7 here, who is a creation of Terry Nation. And then we have the third set here with Davros as the whole thing comes to an end. Really cannot stress enough how much I adored this series. Then another series that I've absolutely adored is Jacob Duffman's 11th Doctor Chronicles, and we have Geronimo here with a new companion as played by Safia Ingar called Valerie Lockwood. We come into the second box set here called All of Time and Space. The third box set puts him against the Cybermen. And finally, Victory of the Doctor as he goes up against the Paradigm Daleks, my favourite release of 2024. Jacob Duffman does an amazing job across all of these box sets, but his portrayal of the 11th Doctor will really be missed. And now we start going into some of the spin-off sets. So first up, we have Class. Here I have volumes 3 and 4. I mean, say what you like about Class, but I really enjoyed the show. I mean, it's sort of like a guilty pleasure. And this set, Secret Diary of a Rhodian Prince, which is only one released but they're not a set, is promising that there's going to be some more. So hopefully we will get a continuation of the show itself before too long. Then we have The Lone Centurion, some sets with Arthur Darvill as Roy Williams here, going through time. So he is a Roman in that one, and in this one he is a Knight of Camelot. Then we go to Gallifrey. Now, I've not really picked up any Gallifrey releases before. I know that there's a huge back catalogue of them, but I have become quite interested in Gallifrey War Room, and I have purchased the first set here and the second set here. They are really, really fun. There is so much political intrigue. There's also some really great set pieces because we're in a time war. So the closer we get to the time war, and now that we're in it, there's a lot more ethical ambiguity to everything that's going on, which is quite interesting. And then we have a one-off release, which was the Year of Martha Jones, starring Freema Agyeman. Of course, a interesting release, but nothing that I particularly found interesting to listen to it again. Then we go into the War Master, which you can see all lined up here. I have all of the War Master sets currently. Last time I did one of these, I didn't have any. In fact, I think there was a comment that says, "Oh, I'm surprised you've not picked up any of the War Master." And since then, I have massively improved that. So the first 4 box sets, I got £45 because of a deal that kind of got me into it. I think I may have had Self-Defense, the one with the 10th Doctor beforehand. But from listening to the first 4 box sets, I was absolutely hooked. And anything that they pump out with Derek Jacobi's face on it, I think I have to pre-order immediately. This range starts off at the end with Only the Good, and then it continues on with Master of Callus, which I think is probably one of my favourites. The Master does some evil stuff to a lot of people in that one. In the 3rd box set, he's joined by the 8th Doctor. In the 4th box set, he becomes Davros in a very, very timey-wimey story. And then we have Heart of Darkness here, once again joined by Paul McGann. In Killing Time, he goes up against Joe Grant and Nyssa. And then in Self-Defense, he is put on trial and is joined by the 10th Doctor, but only at the end. The box set makes out like he's in the whole thing. He's only in the last story. And then we have one of my favourites, which is Escape from Reality, in which the Master goes into the world of storytelling and sort of causes havoc in a series of different stories, including Sherlock Holmes. We have Solitary Confinement, in which the Master is telling tales while he is in prison. Then we have Rogue Encounters, which is an interesting one. It also features Professor Yano, so there's an interesting sort of element there. And the most recent one is Future Phantoms, where the Master is playing a professor and once again telling stories to his students. And now we continue my journey into the spin-offs. Our next one is Beyond Bannerman Road, as part of Rani Takes on the World. And then we also have the follow-up to that, which was The Revenge of Wormwood. This sequel to the Sarah Jane Adventures is very faithful to the show. It's very much along those lines. It feels the same. They're very relaxed, but it's also being very respectful of the character of Sarah Jane and, of course, Elizabeth Sladen. Then we move on to the Paternoster Gang. Now, I've not picked up any of the Paternoster Gang before, but we have the most recent range, which ends fairly soon, which is entitled Trespassers. So we have part 1, part 2 with the casebook of Paternoster Row, and the final one so far, which is entitled No Place Like Home. These, again, very simple, very laid-back stories, and just fun to listen to when you don't want something as strenuous as Torchwood, which we're going into now. So we start off with Outbreak. This was the first release I bought, and it is the idea of a pandemic, which I bought, ironically, during COVID. Then we come on to what they call The Story Continues. So after the show has ended, this is where things continue to go. So we start off with Aliens Among Us, box set 1. We have box set 2 of Alien Among Us right here, and then box set 3 of Aliens Among Us. I have really, really, really enjoyed Torchwood. The sagas have been full of very whimsical stories, but also very deep, hard-hitting stories as well. They followed up that first series with God Among Us. This is when things start getting a bit weird. We have 3 box sets of that with a really interesting narrative with plenty of very, very, very cool set pieces and emotional payoffs and all sorts. And then finally, we have Among Us Part 1 here with Eve Miles on the front, Part 2 and Part 3, where this Torchwood team starts taking itself very seriously against a threat that is really interesting and really relevant. And that's kind of the fun with Torchwood for me, is that you can have this darkness and there's this element that it's parallel to our real world, but at the same time there is this sort of fun with it and sort of mocking characters or certain stereotypes that have appeared over the last couple of years in the media. My final spin-off is the one that sort of started it all for me, I suppose. I first picked up all of these releases a couple of years ago, after sort of waiting for sales and buying them as and when. I think I got a nice deal on the first 4, and then it had a sort of continuation, which you can see as the box set's changed over here, at the same time, called Nemesis. So we're going to start off with Unit Extraction here against the Autons. You just get a really cool story with this unit team that they've developed throughout particularly the first 8 box sets. And this time they're going up against the Autons in a big action set piece extravaganza. And then we have Unit Shutdown, which is much the same. Unit Silence, which of course stars the Silence. And then Unit Assembled, which has classic unit and modern unit coming together to fight the Silurians, and the Sea Devils make an appearance. Then we have Encounters, which is a kind of one-off box set, I suppose. We have 4 individual stories, one featuring a Dalek, one featuring sort of alternate timelines, one featuring the Sontarans, and one featuring ghosts, I think. And the one that started it all for me was Unit Cyber Reality. This kind of got me hooked on it. It also kind of got me hooked on the War Master as well, I have to say. This is a big Cyberman invasion spanning 4 hours. It is full of action set pieces, full of character, just an awful lot of fun just to sort of switch your brain off and just listen to this cyber army approaching and having Unit try to deal with this situation. Then we have Revisitations, which has the Wern as the big sort of 2-parter in a very similar vein to the Cyber Reality box set. But we also have the Lady from Mind of Evil, and I think this is a story about mermaids. Then we have Incursions, the final box set in the first run of 8. This one features a river song. Then things change, they do switch up some elements, and they go to a more like a big sort of saga form. And this is Unit Nemesis. So we have Between Two Worlds, Agents of the Volprene, Objective Earth, and finally, Masters of Time. Now, I think that big sagas like that don't particularly work because you're spreading this sort of huge narrative and dropping all these breadcrumbs and stuff like that. I don't feel like that always appeals to me too much, because I think that by the time that the box sets are fully released, I've kind of lost interest in those breadcrumbs. But Unit Nemesis has been a lot of fun. Very simply, a lot of fun. It has a lot of weaknesses though, and there are certain elements and certain stories that I feel like they don't really fit the narrative. So if you're going through the entire thing one after another, you have sets that are just dedicated to arc stuff. They're less so in this than I think the 8 Doctor Adventures, but I'd much rather this sort of form where you have each box set is following a villain and you have them trying to deal with that villain for the 4 hours. As I come towards the end, I have a series of CDs to show you. Now, they won't stay up, unlike the box sets, and they have a lot of glare to them because they're made of plastic. And with that, I'm going to show them to you like this. We start off with Death World, which is a original script for the 3 Doctors, which never came to light until now. Then we have one of the main ranges, and that is Jubilee, the story that was the basis for Dalek. Then we have Mind of the Hodiak. Mind of the Hodiak is a story that RTD wrote when he was much younger, and it has been picked up by Big Finish, and they have adapted it into a lost story. I think he just wrote it mostly for fun, but it's been now adapted so you can listen to it. It's a very interesting thing. It's very, very, very RTD. Then we have an 8th Doctor adventure called The Silver Turk. I'm a big fan of the Cybermen, and this is one of my favourite Cybermen stories. Then we have Invaders of Mars, which is signed by Mark Benton, I think it is, who is Clive in Rose. This is an interesting story, again, part of the original main range. Then we have some Time Lord Victorious stuff, which I don't massively care for. So we have He Kills Me, He Kills Me Not. We have Enemy of My Enemy, and we have Mutually Assured Destruction. I think the trouble with this sort of Time Lord Victorious series that the Big Finish did is that it follows on from different things. So if you've not read the book, that last story makes no sense to you. So they're not like one story between the 3 episodes. It is like a little bit of a story there, a little bit of a story there, and sort of filling in tiny gaps, which is just not as fun. Then we have a very fun series, which is called Out of Time. So here is the 10th Doctor with the 4th Doctor against the Daleks. Then we have the 10th Doctor and the 5th Doctor against the Cybermen. And then we have the 10th Doctor and the 6th Doctor against the Weeping Angels. We have a couple of little oddities of Torchwood. So we have Forgotten Lives here, starring Eve Miles, which is a release I've still not listened to. I've had it for a long time, but I've not listened to it. I bought it as a CD on eBay because it was really cheap, but I never actually listened to it. And I have Deadbeat Escape, which is the idea of Billy's Manger here, running like a hotel where no one gets to leave. I bought it from Big Finish directly quite a while ago because it was massively reduced, and I thought, that's quite an interesting one. And I really enjoyed his appearance in the Among Us box set. The second one, it was Cuckoo, it was excellent. Then we have a Sontarans versus Rutans release. We have 4 of them. So we have the Battle of Giants Causeway. We have the Children of the Future, starring the 3rd Doctor. And then we have Born to Die, starring Colin Baker here and India Fisher as Charlie. And the final one on that set was in name only. The idea of this was one narrative across the 4 CDs with different doctors. It works quite well. It's interesting to see different doctors go up against the Sontarans, and there is some sort of narrative connections. So it made a pretty strong trilogy or quadrilogy. Then we go into a new series of trilogies, and that is Dark Gallifrey, which started last year. So we have Morbius Part 1, Morbius Part 2, and Morbius Part 3. The idea of Dark Gallifrey is still a little bit ambiguous to me of what's going on. We have more releases in this saga coming soon, but we also have the War Master here, which is the final appearance of David Warner, who's not the War Master, he's the Unbound Doctor, but you'll see the War Master in a second when he appears in the second set. This was a lot of fun. A very sort of comic episode, that one. And then the 3rd episode, which is here, where all of that gets wrapped up. I have to say, the Dark Gallifrey stuff is not particularly my favourite range. I've just not found it that compelling or that interesting so far. And the final section that I've not talked about yet is my vinyls. So I have a limited number of vinyls simply because they seem to have sort of stopped producing them, but at one stage they loved producing these things. Tons of releases got it, so we're going to be talking about them now. So we had one for Time Lord Victorious here. One side contains David Tennant, and if you flip it over, the other side is Paul McGann. We then have a release of Dalek Universe, which is very nice, and it goes right here. And as you can probably imagine, that is followed up by Dalek Universe 2 and Dalek Universe 3, which slot nicely in there. I adore the artwork for these. These ones got individual artworks as well. They are glorious and in such a large scale, look amazing. Then they also did the same for the 9th Doctor Adventures. So we have Ravagers here, and then we have Responds to All Calls. And of course, let's not forget Lost Warriors and my favourite, Old Friends. They continued this tradition into the 2nd series of 9th Doctor Adventures. So we have Back to Earth there, and we have Into the Stars. And the final 2 that round it out is Hidden Depths and Shades of Fear. Sadly, they didn't make any more after this point. I presume they weren't selling too well or something along those lines, but I really think these vinyls are lovely and I'm so happy I have them. The only thing is, now that the 3rd series was never generated in terms of vinyls, it seems a bit weird to just have the 2. And now that I've been all over the room and I have scattered Big Finish box sets across my bedroom, I have reached the end of the video. And that's everything I currently have. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you have enjoyed this video. It has been interesting to have a look about all the stuff, and I didn't quite realise all the stuff I had because it's almost in different places across the room. If you want to go and check out Big Finish reviews that I've done, I'm going to do more throughout 2025. You can see a playlist that I've linked in a direction that will take you to the playlist with all of those videos in. I know I've done reviews of Once and Future, of 6th Doctor box sets, of 7th Doctor box sets, of 8th Doctor box sets. There's a lot of stuff there, and there's even more to come. So thank you very much for watching, and I shall see you soon. Goodbye.